Hello all. Welcome to Psych Motivation. We're winding down. We got two more. Chapter 16 is largely a summary chapter trying to pull it all together. So we're going to do chapter 15 now, and what we're talking about here is growth motivation. Is there a motivation to grow as a human being? And this is inexorably linked to positive psychology and or humanistic psychology. I know some of you have probably taken our course in positive psychology. Maybe a handful of you have taken our course in psychology of adjustment. So a couple concepts touched in there. And as to psychology of adjustment, here is shameless self-promotion time again. I'd love to see it in the fall in psychology of adjustment, Psych 3335, and basically psychology of adjustment is what do we know about psychology and how can we use it to adjust to life challenges. But let's talk positive psychology, growth motivation here for this short little time that we'll be together on this one. Probably in two parts, but I can never estimate that fully as I get into it. So let's talk holism then, positive psychology. Holism really stresses a top-down master motive such as the self and its strivings for fulfillment. And we know what top-down means. Big picture, top-down is big picture, fulfillment. And then we look at the details as they fill in below that. Holism focuses on discovering human potential and encouraging its development. So are works in progress and core ideas that we're motivated to continue that work in the fashion of self-improvement. And already I'm sure many people are pointing out examples where this doesn't hold true, and yes, there are many examples where it doesn't. Positive psychology was that breath of fresh air. You know, psychology up until the time of positive psychology was largely explaining why people were messed up and how to repair them. Well, positive psychology came along and said, can psychology offer something to someone who already functions well but wants to function better, and hence positive psychology, the emphasis on the positive. It devotes attention to the proactive building, right, of personal strengths and personal competencies. It seeks to make people stronger and more productive and to actualize the human potential in all of us. And there's offshoots, like there's positive organizational psychology now that looks at positive psychology in the context of organizational performance. If you take organizational psychology with me, that's something that we'll also talk about as well, and the role in leadership in that. So, as an alternative, positive psychology shifted the emphasis, like I said, from repair to enhancement, and it shifts some emphasis from the past. And remember, like when we look at Freudian psychologists, we have to uncover these unconscious conflict. We have to dig deep. We have to go back and see where these problems were created for ourselves and how we continue to live them out, largely out of awareness. Well, when we talk positive psychology, it's not so much to dwell in the past and how these things occurred, but how to move forward away from these things. So we shift from exploring these weaknesses that we present to developing strengths. So it really is top-down a difference in emphasis. It's more forward-looking rather than backward-looking. And at the core of this is the notion of self-actualization. And it's this ever fuller realization of one's talents, right? Our capacity and our potentialities. And this is straight from Maslow. So two fundamental directions at this is the autonomy, is greater mindfulness, the courage to create realistic appraisals. And we've looked at autonomy as a primary motivation in the past. Rosie's freaking out. I don't know what the hell she's doing here. Rosie, do you want to come say hello? No, she does not. All right. And then openness, which is openness to ourselves and openness to learning about ourselves, the process of self-realization. Right? So both these occur. It's a little breezy up here. I got the window up in the attic open a little bit. You know, up here on the third floor we get a pretty good breeze, but sometimes it whacks the cats out. So I think Rosie's reacting to the breeze right now. Maslow, what can we say? We can say a lot about Maslow. And what's the conversation of Maslow without a picture of Maslow? The smiling Abraham Maslow. Most of the pictures I've ever found of Maslow, big smile, happy guy, right? And he developed Maslow's hierarchy of needs. and this was to explain in terms of need-based motivation, that these needs present and then motivate us to satisfy these needs, right? But they have to be done in order. So this was Maslow's big deal, that there's 5 needs, they must be satisfied in order. Once you satisfy the basic need, the most basic, the bottom need, then you're free to explore satisfaction of a higher need. And notice that it goes in this order, but if this need down here isn't being fulfilled, then these others is as if they don't exist, right? And this hierarchical need was a problem for Maslow's theory, because we may find that some people will focus on a higher level need to the detriment of meeting a lower level need, and this was not something that Maslow allowed for. And Maslow, as he moved through his career, said, this is what I believe, but it's not necessarily empirically supported. So we still cling to Maslow's hierarchy, and we like it and it resonates with us, but I think that there's some important caveats. First of all, needs are not hierarchical, and we'll get to that in just a minute with a different kind of theorist in a couple slides. But what Maslow's saying is at the bottom is physiological needs. We need air, water, food, shelter, sleep, etc., sex, and we can't go without these things. And we can't worry about something like self-esteem if we've got an empty belly. And so that's how Maslow works this. As an employer, and there's an organizational flavor to this, when my workers come to me, they'll be motivated to work hard for me if they lack food, for example, and shelter, because they can get a paycheck from me and they can then fulfill that need of food and shelter. Here's the interesting idea, and this is a solid when you think about it. Once people then get this need met, they've been working for me a little while and they no longer worry about food or shelter, then food and shelter no longer operate as motivators because those needs are met, right? So an unmet need, a met need doesn't motivate, only unmet needs. So as an employer, what I have to concern myself with is this hierarchy that once I meet a lower level need in my employee, then I have to appeal to their higher level needs to maintain the same level of motivation. And that's one way to look at it. And that's got some backing to it. So we just go up. Once my need for food and water, then I start worrying about safety and security. Once you meet my need for safety and security, you present me with, let's say, a safe workplace and a union that provides me some security, right? Or in terms of teachers' tenure, right? Then I don't think about that anymore, and I start concentrating on love and belongingness, and I look at my relationships. And once my relationships, my affiliation need is satisfied, and remember that's a need we talked about earlier in class, right? Then self-esteem, and we had a whole chapter on the self and the strivings and its strivings, right? And once I'm meeting my esteem needs, then I'm going to move to the pinnacle, which this was all about, was self-actualization. And this is where I experience vitality. I'm free to be creative. I have the experience of being self-sufficient and or autonomous being in my approach, right? I'm authentic. I am who I am. I can exhibit playfulness, and I find meaningfulness in life. Right? So all of those are components of Maslow's hierarchy, but notice it's a hierarchy, and that's kind of a failure. And I can ask you, can you think of violation of hierarchy? Can a need be met and no longer then be driving force? Can these needs operate simultaneously? These are all problematic issues for Maslow's theory. So we see the lower need, the lower the need is in the hierarchy, the more urgently is felt. And we can say, well, that makes sense, because many of the needs, like hunger, right, a hunger drive, right, rather than a motivation in this case, is going to be more urgent than wanting to be with someone necessarily. The lower the need in the hierarchy, the sooner it appears in our developmental trajectory. So for children, you can see that the lower needs are present, but not necessarily the higher needs, but we could argue against that. Needs in the hierarchy fulfilled sequentially from the lowest to the highest. Tremendous issues with that. Not a solid on that one at all. So, as often as the case, we see someone present a theory and then people discuss the theory, empirically test the theory, and find places where boundary conditions where the theory doesn't hold up any longer, contexts where the theory doesn't make sense. Aldifer comes at us largely kind of addressing issues in Maslow's hierarchy that are problematic. Aldifer comes at us with 3 needs rather than 5, like Maslow, and those 3 are existence, relatedness, and growth. Now notice existence, relatedness, and growth all map onto Maslow's 5 hierarchical needs. We're basically talking the same thing here. 3 versus 5. Existence could be bottom 2 Maslow, relatedness then middle, and then growth could be the top 2 of Maslow. So we're talking the same thing. But what does Aldifer come at us with? Hey, they're not hierarchical. More than one need can be activated at one time. We can be trying to satisfy multiple needs simultaneously. So he gets away from that deal killer hierarchy that Maslow presented. And he also says that needs can be substituted for one another. So if I have an aspect in my work, let's say I'm not making the most money in the world, which might be the case if you argue about what I do at Ohio State. Let's say if you look at me at Ohio State and you look at me at Columbus State, I'm a faculty member at Columbus State, I was, right? And if I taught summer and taught an overload, I would make $75,000 to $80,000. If I teach the maximum number of courses I'm allowed to teach as a senior lecturer at Ohio State, I make about $56,000. So if I make $75,000 or $80,000 at Columbus State and only $56,000 full-time at Ohio State, then why the hell did I quit at Columbus State and teach exclusively at Ohio State? Well, obviously the financial need isn't as pressing for me as, let's say, self-actualization. Instead of teaching 5 sections of Psych 1100 as I would, let's say, at Columbus State within a given semester, at Ohio State I get to teach 4 different classes during that semester. And so self-actualization, it makes me work harder, it makes me think harder, and those are things I like to do. So Aldifer, needs can be substituted for one another. Self-actualization takes precedence over, let's say, income. Although, let's face it, at either school I earn a decent livable base income, so maybe that disqualifies my whole conversation there. You be the judge. Also, there's a frustration regression component. Aldifer saying if we're frustrated in one need, then we might regress to what might be considered a lower level need. That we're flexible in how needs drive us. So Aldifer kind of stands up, I think, a little more strongly than Maslow. But of course, Maslow came first, and Maslow is the name that resonates with us. So the deal of self-actualization, though, and notice growth or self-actualization is present for Aldifer and Maslow. 6 behaviors that encourage self-actualization. Well, you make growth choices. So when I'm thinking about what it is I'm going to do, the activities in which I engage, what I read, the way I spend my time, am I making choices that center on my growing as a human being? Am I honest? And that's number 2. Am I honest with myself, and am I honest with others? And this is a horrible situation that we live in now because honesty has taken a holiday. That lying is paramount, that alternative facts, alternative realities, labeling others as liars, etc., the fake media and all this other nonsense is really in violation of self-actualization. That is the second point in being honest. Be honest with oneself and be honest with those around you. Right? 3. Situationally position yourself for peak experiences. So find a way that you can do what it is you want to do and do it in a way that you want to do it that really represents a peak experience. And notice how that ties to growth and honesty. 4, give up defensiveness. And if you want to gain power, I give you advice now and again in this course. If you screw up, go back to number 2, be honest, and then 4, give up defensiveness. The thing is, if you come out and you say, look, I messed up, boy, I sure made a mistake, and this is the mistake I made, and this is how I made it, and this is how I regret making that mistake, you take away other people's power tremendously. Because, everyone says, well, we live in a world of gotcha, but you can't got me, or gotcha me, or however you want to put that, if I've already admitted this mistake. I said, look, I want to tell you guys something. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to present to you right now, I messed up. And you're probably going to hear that I messed up, but I'm going to tell you first, I messed up, and this is how I messed up, and this is how I feel bad about messing up. And then the people who want to report on you, hey, you messed up, you say, yeah, I know. I already told everyone. What's your point? Let's move on. So this is giving up defensiveness is really kind of a source of power rather than a source of vulnerability. The people who treat admitting fault as a source of vulnerability miss the bus. They don't have the picture, right? Admit your vulnerability, and through that arises strength, not weakness. Let the self emerge. So hey, let it come out. Be who you are. Be your own best you, and let that self emerge. And be open to experience. And notice this is an important one. The big 5 personality traits. Right, openness to new experience, but open to experience, open to what is out there in the world. So intimate and fulfilling relationships that support both autonomy and openness really kind of facilitate this. And if you're lucky to find a partner who supports you in being you and supports you in becoming you, and that's an interesting way to put it, but supports you in becoming more who you are, you have found a person that you don't want to ever let go. Cling to that person and try your damnedest to do the same for them, to let them be who they are. Now, in talking about B, let's use this fancy term, Maslow's B values, and this is very 60s, 70s, right? Be here now, right? It's kind of kumbaya stuff back in the day. Maslow's B values. So what does it mean to be self-actualized? And this is where it becomes a little problematic for some of us, because if I'm going to self-actualize, to what extent should I determine that myself rather than be told what the formula is or what represents self-actualization? Now, Maslow's got this list of B values, so I might take minor issue with it. All right, so wholeness, unity, openness at the top there. Perfection or just so-ness, and that's a very Buddhist kind of Zen type thing. Completion, finality, ending. Closure is a term. Goodness, oughtness, right? Form, beauty, richness. I'm not going to read all of them. Playfulness, humor. But it's kind of ironic that in self-actualization we're provided a list of B values. So Maslow's got a tremendous amount of good, but there's a couple issues that some of us might take with his theorizing. Now, Maslow's D needs are deficiencies, and notice that needs present themselves often as deficiencies. So when we go way back in the course and we look at needs versus drives versus motivations, needs, especially like quasi-needs, are things that we believe that we need through our process of socialization, and then they become D values, that is deficiencies in their absence. So their absence will be rapidly felt when we have these deficiencies and develop a need state or develop from a need state, especially in this case maybe quasi-needs is more what we're talking about. Obviously drives are more biologically instigated, at least our definitions in this course have kind of put it that way. So, actualizing tendency. The organism has one basic tendency and striving to actualize, to maintain, to enhance the experience of the self. We're moving to, I think, a real profound thinker in this respect. Any guesses on where we're going with this? Okay, well, you see it right there. It's Carl Rogers. So what we're talking about, we're going to talk about Carl Rogers. Let me pause here and we'll give him a full